And welcome to the Filmsteins Podcast, a podcast where we are challenged with trying to articulate a love for art and storytelling. Today I am joined by my musically inclined friend, Lucy.
Hello, everyone.
I'm glad everybody could join us today. Thank you, everybody, for being here, because today we will be discussing Roman Polanski's 2002 film, The Pianist. And I'll just start off by saying that I'm very much of two minds with this film. Part of me wonders why even make this into a movie. It's so anti-performative, uninterested in its characters, and deeply meditative while not saying very much. It really begs the question of this story, this experience is best suited for a book. But on the other hand, my mind is telling me, no, every shot feels like something out of a documentary. It kind of runs this course of The Wolf of Wall Street, beating you with the downtime, the excess of downtime, just waiting. There's a lack of passion in performance because it's a movie of survival. Spielman and company have been reduced down to not knowing if they're going to see another day. They're not concerned about their vices and what makes them human. So it's kind of a challenging movie to navigate through for me because on one hand, what I love about film really isn't present. But on the other, there is something really successful wrapped up in this. I wish our man was a little bit more passionate about music. I feel a little baited with his introduction of being more interested in love and flirting while bombs are going off. It's a little misleading, but I also love at the same time the kind of reversion to going back to exactly how things once were before the war. Because I think the film starts out with Spielman in the recording studio and it ends in the exact same way. They look like the exact same shot, the exact same scene. The book ending is wonderful, and it's so mundane that it hits in a really special way. Even though it's not a very performative film, I do wish I would have gotten more out of at least Spielman's family. And it does seem to me that the film, up until Spielman is in the ruins, it's kind of all just a reason to get to that point for Spielman to find the piano, have the Nazi guy be nice to him live in the attic. The film seems to take on a different vibe at that point, which makes sense contextually, but we did kind of flip the script of entering this very romantic side of this experience of Spielman's. So I don't know, man. I'm kind of two minds on this film. I liked it, don't get me wrong, but I'm very curious how you felt about The Pianist.
I very much enjoyed this movie. It was a pretty melancholic film. It didn't leave me empty, like All Quiet on the Western Front, the 2022 film. And it didn't play with my emotions, but it wasn't a happy film either. It puts the audience into a survival mode, like our main character is. There's no time to be sad or empty, but there's no time to celebrate any kind of perseverance. Anytime he moves forward or gets away with anything, it's not a celebration point like it would be in another type of film. There's also this luck or randomness element to his survival that I like. Spielman is not portrayed as a clever character or a heroic character per se. Not saying that he's dumb, but that it doesn't matter what kind of person he is. But it was just the luck of the draw with what kept him from meeting the same fate as his family did. I agree with you on this film being a little bit anti-performative, but I guess I took it as the movie being deeply understated in the sense that there's no forced emotion, there's no melodrama, there's no overt sentimentality. The score is not about to play with you or your emotions. The cinematography is subtle. The actions of the characters are subtle. Even the death and the chaos we see out on the street isn't elaborate or extreme.
No, it's mundane.
And I like it. I think it works. it creates, and I hate to say the word realistic, but it creates some sort of realism here. And I like that you mention it being sort of documentary style, because that's how I viewed it too. It forces you to think about the story, because the story and what you get from it is everything. I haven't read the book. I know there's a source material, but it seems like they read it and they knew what to do with it. The movie beautifully captures the entire picture of the decay of this man's humanity and his spirit during this crazy time in history. Through the cinematography, through the tone, through the dialogue, we see a decline. In the beginning of the film, our main character and a little bit of his family sort of start off with being in denial that these things are happening, and this acceptance of where things are now, like him not being able to go into that cafe or them being able to go sit at the park. The tone is pretty light in the beginning of the movie. And with this movie being 2 hours and a half, I wasn't sure where we were going with this kind of tone, but it eventually gets darker and dirtier and everything becomes uncertain, and it was very well done.
Yeah, in another movie, you could very well have seen him just die at the end.
Yeah, exactly. The theme of music is very subtle here. I agree with you. There wasn't a lot said about this man and his artistic talents. The music for me was more of a symbol for Spielman. It was his hope. It was his way to keep going, to survive, and eventually something that saved him. More of a symbol that art is powerful and moving, instead of being talented and being the best piano player you could be that saves you at the end of the day. It just happened to be something he was, but not our focus. The characters were good. I liked the family, but there weren't a lot of character interactions or, like you said, performative pieces. But I found that to be very intentional. One of my favorite lines in the movie is when they're off to the concentration camps and he tells his sister, "It's a funny time to say this, but I wish I knew you better." And that line right there solidified for me this lack of character interaction. We didn't get a great relationship with his sister, with his family, because there was no great relationship with his sister or his family. He wishes there was, and there wasn't, and it's such a crazy time to be saying it out loud. And this moment made me tear up, because it's just one of those moments where, do you say the thing out loud? If a family member was dying of cancer or something very obvious that they had months to live, do you acknowledge that? Does it make it easier? And she just tells him thank you, because what else can you say at a time like that? Well, brother, let's make it happen. No, you don't know what's gonna happen. I do like that you said that this could be best suited for a book, because I see so many literary devices written all over this film that I very much enjoyed. We have this moment of foreshadow when his brother lays down the last bit of money they had, I think, and he places it in the middle of the table to hide it in plain sight. And then later in the film, they hide Spielman at the heart of the lion's den in plain sight, and I thought that was just awesome.
The last of the Spilsmans.
Damn, like the last of the money. We also have some irony in the film. The main one that stood out to me was this sort of situational irony when he was placed in a room with a piano, being this awesome piano player, but he couldn't touch it. And we have this brief scene of him playing the piano, which I thought he was actually playing the piano, but no, it turns out he was pretending to play the piano. And that sort of gut-punching feeling of, man, this guy really needs to keep silence. He really needs to keep quiet. And that moment really enforcing the silence motif in this film. This isn't about the people that experienced all this harshness in this war, but this is about him. And we also have this brief allusion to Shakespeare that, I'm always here for. I wasn't mad at the pacing of the film either. We cover 6 years of the war into this 2.5 hours, which is a lot, but it didn't feel overwhelming or overbearing to me. It was executed very well. We had the slow build-ups, we had the tension, the moments of freedom, the moments of reflection, the isolation, the passage of time, and a pretty nice resolution. A resolution that I could breathe at the end of. I like this film a lot, and while watching it, it really makes you think and reflect on what you would do in a situation like this, because at the end of the day, we can't forget that this happened. This isn't a story that someone made up, but there were people who experienced this. What would you have done in this situation? Would you have been too proud to take that police work and beat up your fellow Jews just for survival? Would you die with honor? And these questions are brought up in the film, but that's kind of paired with, it doesn't really matter when there's a gun pointed to your head, or when you're starving and you have to eat the chowder off the ground.
Yeah, what is honor and dignity and these things that we strive to live for when you've been reduced to animals?
The main point of this film, for me, was that we're all humans. We all share the same human qualities, right? That was the point too, the allusion to Shakespeare. His brother quotes it in the film, I think. If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? When are we going to learn to be nice to each other? We all suffer. We all experience the same things. How can Shakespeare say it back then, and then a film in 2002, and many after, still keep telling us the same things?
There seems to be a self-awareness in this film, no doubt, in its mundanity, in its boringness, and just waiting. Even to your point of him saying that to his sister about knowing her more, it's almost like the film apologizing to us for not having enough time to know these people because they were taken away so quickly. But I will say the absolute worst part of the film is when Spilsman is with his family and the back and forth between everybody. It's chaotic in the worst way. And I'm not sure if it's a writing problem, a performance problem, direction problem, camera problem, but yeah, there's a great level of uncertainty and how nothing kind of matters outside of your immediate view. And the film no doubt captures that, I think, wonderfully with its use of time. If a lot was happening over the course of 6 years for this man, it would probably feel pretty truncated and too quick. But even with 6 years going by, and the film being 2.5 hours long, we're waiting constantly with Spilsman. Kind of like Wolf of Wall Street with its use of excess. We sit with him. And it's torture at times. He's literally tortured, spiritually, that is, I should say, when the people next door are playing the piano and he just has to listen when he's at the heart of the Nazi occupation in Poland, or Warsaw, right? At one point he's face to face with the piano that he can't play. And yeah, there is this kind of overbearing weight of just luck, just timing with Spilsman. Even to the point of the very end, which seems to be on a different level. But even then, the Nazi dude doesn't know who Spilsman is. The Nazi captain even has this vibe of, and you find out later that they've lost. The Russians are on their way. They're going to be pushed out anyways. There's no reason to cause harm anymore because you're not in control. It almost demands we had some perspective on Wilhelm Hosenfeld, the Nazi captain. What changes in your head when you are the organizer of wiping out cities, groups of people, and you come to a point where you just don't care anymore to kill this one lone Jew in a broken house kind of thing. It's like, what goes off in your head to make that change?
Yeah, I guess it reminds me of The Zone of Interest and how that film is trying to answer something like that. Maybe not in the specific scenario of saving one Jew, but as a whole, what has it all come down to?
I love it when these groups of people moving out of Warsaw into like the ghetto or whatever, and then onto the trains, every time they would move in groups, they would leave scores of luggage and clothes.
Yeah, those are really powerful scenes when that's all you can see, the tangible items that people left behind. Which also reminds me of one of my favorite scenes in here. And I slightly disagree with you on the family thing. I don't think they were the weakest part of the film. I don't know what would be the weakest part of the film. I'd really have to dig into that. But it was the moment where they're waiting and there's a boy walking around selling caramel, toffee, chocolate, something along those lines for what seems like a high amount of money. Not sure on conversions or anything like that. But just this question of what is this boy going to do with the money? What is the point of him still going at it, still trying to get anything? And the dad makes the decision to group everyone's money and buy a caramel from him because at the end of the day, he's realized that it doesn't matter. This money doesn't matter. Nothing matters. What matters right now is maybe giving this boy some hope, but having this last meal, sort of say, with his family. They break it into 6 pieces, however many of them they were, and they eat it together, all at the same time. We had a moment earlier in the film where the family has this dinner, and it's a celebratory dinner because they've heard some good news regarding the status of the war. And just the parallel between those two scenes was pretty drastic and pretty moving for me. That's one of the sections where I definitely teared up because I was hopeful at this point because the family had come together. I think briefly before that, one of the daughters and the son, Henrik, had been separated and you thought they were goners, but then they came back. And then you have the sense of hope, and that kind of made me feel good. And then they're all walking them to the train to go to the camps. And then that moment was gone for me.
Yeah, the storytelling is really slick. We have this evolution of how we are going to treat these groups of people. And first, we're not going to let them in certain parts of the town, certain buildings. We're not going to let them sit on the park benches. And it's almost just not a big deal. I maybe wish we could have gotten a little bit more of that early evolution of them being introduced to these new laws. But at the same time, I wish the film kind of started off with him and his family in the line and them getting on the train and then him spending the rest of the film alone, waiting. So that would have kind of either given me a lot more of him and his family before the separation or just waiting with him the whole movie.
Yeah, I guess I needed that beginning piece to feel that family connection that would later devastate me when they're splitting a piece of caramel. And we do get a little bit of these new laws being introduced when the dad is reading the newspaper about them having to wear an armband
That's
with
fair.
the symbol. And he, like I would be, is asking all these questions. Like, who's providing these? Do we have to make them ourselves? Like, who do we ask about this? And that part stuck out to me, and it was ironically funny.
That was one of the better moments with the family inside the apartment, the house. Those are the parts that seem to be weaker for me when they're sitting out there in the contained area waiting to be picked up by the train and they split the caramel. That's awesome. Awesome storytelling that, to your point of sharing one last meal together all at the same time, it would have hit even harder. And it's so hard to really even suggest this because we're kissing that 2.5 hour mark. anything more maybe starts to divert the point of the waiting, right? We start to encroach on the big message, but having a completely normal dinner at one point and then ending that episode of Spilsman's life with his family with that last shared meal being that caramel would have been really great too. But suggesting 10, 15 more minutes is a lofty ask when you start to kiss that 3-hour mark, though. I get that.
Yeah.
I don't even like watching 3-hour movies, so I would eat my words, I'm sure. But the family did leave a lot to be desired for me. And again, I'm not sure if it's a performative problem or direction. But there's no doubt some masterful storytelling in that, those echoes, that foreshadowing.
There are two things I had an issue with in this film, sort of minor. But the first one being that I was completely confused between the two white blonde girls. I believe when he was rescued or helped escaped, there's a couple that takes him in initially, and then later on when he escapes the heart of the lion's den section, he gets saved by the other girl.
Yeah.
And I guess I thought the whole time that the first girl was Dorota, the girl he was infatuated with in the beginning. I don't know if that was confusing to you or if it was just to me and I really needed to pay attention to what these characters looked like. But again, with how things were moving in the film, we didn't get any kind of connection with anybody for us to recognize who these characters were. It wasn't until later in the film that he sees her and sees that she's pregnant and has this whole initial interaction with that I thought we already had. So it kind of threw me off.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that might be also, to my point, that's an example of bad characterization, because I'm totally on board with you there. And that is maybe a byproduct of how anti-performative this film is. We don't really get a chance to sit down with any of these people, right? The only reason we know that Spilsman's dad is the dad because he's the old man with white hair.
Right.
I felt similar about the cousin who was working with the Nazis.
Yeah, I don't know if they were related.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but he was somehow relevant, and I was a little bit confused when he would pop up. And same thing with some of the white gentlemen who were moving Spilsman around later. I was just like, this is where the documentary anti-performative thing starts to bite this movie in the ass. I don't know who any of these people are. And I get that Spilsman doesn't either to some degree, and there's some play off of that, especially with the guys who are moving him around. But you obviously do run this major risk of confusing you, the audience.
Yeah, you don't want to leave your audience confused on a character that's really this guy's first love or infatuation or whatever you want to call it. With as little melodrama as we get from this film, we, people who like melodrama, need these moments of, that was that girl, and it was a little shattered for me. Again, not too big of a deal. It wasn't what I got from the movie. It wasn't a movie about love or reconnections, but it was definitely something that I was like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah, and it's funny because the easy way to navigate around that is have striking people. Just cast striking people.
Yeah, you know who Adrian Brody is.
Yeah, and even his sister, the dark-haired girl, she wasn't much of a character, and I wish we could have gotten more out of her, just like Spilsman. But casting just the right person to invoke that familiarity, maybe some sense of comfortness, at least for Spilsman, while also making it maybe a little scarier too, because Spilsman, of all people, should not be comfortable. He should be on his tippy toes all the time.
Right, that's a great point. Maybe we should have brought Naomi Watts. My second issue, which is more minor than the first issue, were these references to the date. They felt very random to me. I don't know if they were. I don't know if I'm just lacking some history knowledge here of when we were told what time it was. But we are covering 6 years here. And I'm really not sure how many times we were told what date it was, what year it was. But again, they just felt very random, not relevant to what was going on, either in Spielman's mind or to the wars or pacts or wins that were going on in history at the time.
Sure, and that's kind of a funny point too, because that's obviously stripped right out of the book, no doubt. And they are irrelevant. These dates are deeply irrelevant to us, not to Spilsman. And it's one of those things that, like how I feel about The Family, you kind of want more out of it to kind of ground you in the greater scheme of what's happening. Obviously, that temptation was rightly avoided because Spilsman would have no idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure. This is one of the biggest wars in history. These are some of the dates you do know more than other wars. But I guess I felt no consistency when I was being told these dates, or any kind of point for the lack of consistency. If it was just to feel like desperate, or I don't know how much time has passed, just like Spielman doesn't know how much time has passed, then don't give me a date until the war is over.
Sure, I could have really liked seeing that, actually. Because it kind of does ultimately just serve the purpose of, oh, he's been waiting here for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay. To what end? To just the end of the uncertainty of whether this man's going to survive. But I feel it definitely leaves a little bit to be desired in grounding itself in the greater context. But again, it may have been really powerful if we just didn't really have dates, especially during the waiting game.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Soviets kick out the occupied Nazis. And then we find out how long we've actually been waiting with Spilsman.
Yeah. Like, oh my god, it's been 5 years? What? Yeah. And I guess the last thing I want to talk about is this shift from the beginning of the film to the end of the film. And we briefly cover it, but how bright and light everything is at the beginning of the movie, and then how grimy and dark we get towards the end of the film. I thought that was done really well. It sort of reminds me of the Harry Potter films and how they kind of tried to do that, but failed miserably. Not in a specific film, but throughout the entire 7 films. How the first one is significantly brighter and lighter than the last one, but they don't shift everything else with it. They just make everything darker. But here in this film, yes, we do that with the lighting, the cinematography, the tone, but we also do it with Spielman himself, and just how physically different he looks from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. How much skinnier he is. But one of the best details that I saw with this transition was at the end, whenever he was with that German captain, and Spielman kept grabbing that can of cucumbers or whatever it was that he found and sort of migrating with it. When the guy asked him to go play the piano, he would grab the can of cucumbers and take it with him and go to the piano. He played this beautiful piece, and then he was like, okay, show me where you live, where you're staying, where you're sleeping. And he grabs that can and moves with it. And he just looks like a rat that found this piece of food, this crumb, and this man is not letting go of it. And I thought that was just an awesome detail.
Absolutely. That last section where he's in that ruined house is 10 out of 10.
And then the guy gives him that piece of bread and the jam, and then a little object that I didn't get at first. It didn't click until like 10 seconds later. I'm like, oh my god, that was a can opener.
That's what I'm saying, that it almost feels like this whole film was made just to get to that final section, because that end section is on a whole nother level. I wish the rest of the film was that good. It's breathtaking, that last section. And to your point of this ratness, Spilsman goes from living in Warsaw with his family, big apartment, to a smaller, rundown apartment, to shared quarters with these workers, to a locked, like kennel-like apartment, to hide, of course, to living in an attic, being reduced to that raccoon, afraid to come down when anyone's around, holding on to that bread and that can of cucumbers. There's some developments and evolution in this experience, because it's less of a character evolution because of how reduced this man is to, I hate to say it, but just like a starving dog type thing.
Yeah. I agree with you. That ending was phenomenal. It was worth that wait, that desperation, that survival mode.
Well, man, thank you for watching this movie with me and talking about it here today.
You're welcome.
Do you have a budget guess?
I'm going with 65 mil. Long movie, several sets, a lot of people, what feels like a lot of construction with that wall, with the buildings, the chaos, the destruction. It just felt relatively expensive, but not crazy expensive.
Well, it says here that it was $35 million.
Holy crap.
And it went on to make $120 million.
Ooh.
So it did all right for itself. And over on Letterboxd with 1.34 million people, they weighed in at a 4.4, one of the highest rated films on Letterboxd.
Wow. It's pretty high. I'm not too far. I'm giving this a 4. Everything works about this film. This is probably my favorite Holocaust film, my favorite World War II film. Not that I've seen many, I will say. I've probably read more literature on these survival stories than I have watched movies.
This movie lives somewhere between a 3 and a 3.5 for me. I'm leaning towards a 3 just because of this lack of characterization. This, itch I have of why is this even a movie? Of course, it doesn't need to justify itself to be a movie at all, but certain stories are served best in certain mediums, and the objective of waiting and not knowing and being one of the lucky ones for no reason than just total happenstance, I think doesn't land quite as neatly as it could have. Maybe a better director could have brought this to life a little bit more. But at the same time, we may have lost some of this documentary, mundane, dull kind of flavor that is necessary too.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most crucial points.
So I'm really of two minds, and it's kind of hard to place, obviously. I didn't love the film as a whole. I loved a lot of sections, but it is an excellent movie, no doubt. All right, man. Well, thank you again, and thank you guys for listening to this episode of The Filmsteins. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Remember, we post every Wednesday and Friday with brand new episodes on all of our free feeds like YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Our next free episode will be on another Adrian Brody film called The Brutalist. Very much looking forward to that. Not looking forward to the runtime. I hope you guys look forward to that. Remember to leave nice comments, thoughts, and ideas on our Patreon as well. Come subscribe. Come request a movie over on Patreon. We appreciate all the support. Thank you guys very much. But until next time, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of The Filmsteins. Thanks for tuning in and joining us on our cinematic journey. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and gained some new insights and perspectives on the world of movies. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, especially Patreon, at patreon.com/filmsteins. And follow us on social media for more film-related content. We love hearing from our listeners, so if you have any feedback, suggestions, movie recommendations, or book recommendations, please feel free to reach out to us. Until next time, keep watching and keep loving the magic of movies. This is the Filmsteins signing off.